Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander's Core Studio. Welcome to the show. Okay, so on today's episode, I'm going to be asking you, is this the most hated deck of all time in Commander? A concept that I've actually never thought about building. I am definitely not going to build this myself, and one that I can see the thought process behind building the deck, and I can see the thought process behind thinking that the deck is okay, but not necessarily understanding where, well, this could go wrong. Let's jump into it. So this really interesting post from Inspire Courage on EDH's subreddit. LGS player brings a support strategy deck. Yeah, a support strategy deck. So exactly what is that? So let's read through here real quick. 3 players sat down with me to start a new game. One of them I knew and 2 were strangers to me. We were checking on what kind of game everyone wants to play, and player A says his deck works on every power level. I gotta learn about this statement, ask him why. Yeah, that makes sense, because saying that your deck works on every single power level, I mean, maybe if you have like an all clones deck and like copy spells deck, maybe, then that could be something. Like if you're like, okay, I'm just copying what the other players do. But outside of that, not too many decks at all could ever really work on any power level. He explained to us that he plays a support strategy. The deck he likes most, he will support with his cards to get the win. We clarified if he meant group hug and if there's a strategy behind his deck to win, which he denied. Helping someone win is also a win for me. I enjoy being a support player, was his answer. Okay, so again, this is just a different perspective on the game that, yeah, to some might seem like it's okay, but we'll talk about the problematic things about that, and actually it really is described pretty well in this and how things went. I was about to ask him to play another deck, but the other 2 players shrugged and just wanted to give it a try. In the end, player A's Kenrith Return King deck spent his cards and mana to literally kingmake, and player B and his Caesar Legion Empire because, quote, he's a Fallout fan. He had cards that gave him life points, or as for creatures, counter spells, removal to protect his stuff. Of course, there was also Kenrith to help player B out. To be fair, player A seemed to enjoy his deck and his strange strategy while also being very polite. After the game, he just didn't get why such a playstyle is not fun for most people. I tried to explain that EDH is not a co-op game, except for some diplomacy, but I swear this dude was about to cry. It's like we destroyed his whole world of MTG. He did not have another deck, so we lent him one for a second round. We interrupted this game with him after he king made the Fallout deck again. Sad we would not accept his playstyle, he left the LGS. Okay, the other two and me were very confused and also felt bad, but man, this can't be a normal way of playing the game, right? This guy wasn't salty at all, very polite, meant to have fun with his deck. He got sad when we told him we don't like his support strategy. Have you ever faced such a deck? How would you handle the situation? Okay, so again, I think this is a very interesting post overall, and just, again, a concept I have never necessarily thought about with this and how it can be incredibly problematic. It's something that if you are a newer player to Commander, yeah, showing up with a deck around, this type, you might not seem like it's a bad idea. It's a multiplayer game, so thinking, okay, I'll just support another player the entire time and let them win, it takes away from the entire table, though, when you do something like that. Now, other types of decks do exist out there, and again, they did clarify, right? Like, they asked, is this a group hug deck? Meant a group hug deck? He said no, like absolutely not. And already, group hug decks are not very popular in the grand scheme of things in Magic at all when it comes to Commander for what they do. Now, those decks are more so, and I'm trying to show on the screen, hopefully here, right here. Yeah, like Rites of Flourishing is a card in that deck, right? This one benefits everyone. This one gives everyone extra draw, gives an extra land each turn. This is something that helps every single player out there. And those types of decks still also are not all that enjoyable to many Commander players out there. It's a pretty, I'm not going to say hated strategy, but one that many players don't like to play with or against because, again, it's changing the game without trying to really win necessarily. Now, like, some group hug decks are more, in my opinion, like political control. I would call my Feldergrift deck political control, where they try to act like their group hug, but they actually are going to stab you in the back, essentially, and win the game at some point. That being said, again, like, this is a different level. This is a different step in a different direction where it's kind of, to me, more like one of the most salty cards of all time, Divine Intervention. It has a salt score of 1.97. One of the saltiest cards of all time is an 8-mana enchantment that basically just tries to actually draw the game out. It just is actually, you know what? This game, no one wins. It's just a draw. That's why this enchantment, again, which is incredibly, not super hard to pull off, but it's like difficult enough to pull off, essentially. And essentially, when you do that, the game is a draw. You literally spend 8 mana, you spend all these turns, you do all these things for no one to win the game. And that's kind of like how the outcome of, well, this entire strategy is. Again, like, a support deck strategy around Kenrith the Return King might sound like a good idea to probably a newer player who maybe is just getting into the format, essentially, where it's like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to have fun by helping out another player. But essentially what you are doing is you are turning the game into, like, one-sided, two-headed giant in a way, where you literally just have built your entire deck to benefit one other player heavily. You're not trying to win the game at all. In fact, you're actively trying to lose the game by just, like, allowing that player to snowball so much that they win the game probably quite quickly as well, because the other two players are not teamed up, or at least you are forcing them to team up to even try to have a chance, which they might not, because again, like, you literally built your entire deck to support that other deck and help them out entirely. So you are really playing like a different game. You are entirely changing what the game inherently is. It is no longer a game of Commander. It is no longer 1 versus 1 versus 1 versus 1. It is literally a game of 2 versus 1 versus 1. That is just how the game becomes, because you are actively king-making. Now, when it comes to king-making, there's kind of like different, and it's kind of funny because it's like king-making, right? But it's like Kenrith the Return King, so it's doubly king. But when it comes to king-making, there's like different levels of what people are okay with when it comes to king-making. In my opinion, like, here you go. Like, someone's swinging at me, or someone's about to swing at me and take me out of the game. I've got mana open with, you know, some kind of a removal spell, essentially, and I'm like, hey, all right, yeah, I understand that you want to swing at me and take me out, but if you do so, I'm going to take out your commander. Like, I'm just going to take out your commander, so I recommend not swinging at me. Kind of, you know, giving that kind of a threat to essentially say, like, hey, don't take me out. You're still politicking there. But if they do swing at you, you actively go through with your threat and you take out their commander, which puts them at a disadvantage to another player potentially. And sometimes that can be to the point where it literally just wins the other player the game that's not swinging at you, because you have disadvantaged that player for swinging at you. I find that to be completely fair. It's like, you know, if you're going to swing at me, you're going to swing at me. I'm still trying to give you a choice not to, okay? Actively king-making, though, is literally just, okay, I have Kenrith the Return King as my commander. Again, I have a support strategy type deck somehow, and I am actually utilizing, again, all these abilities on Kenny. Let's read them real quick. Pay a red, all creatures gain triple and haste all turn. Pay 1 in a green, counter target creature. Pay 2 in a white, target player gains 5 life. Pay 3 in a blue, target player draws a card. Pay 4 in a black, basically reanimated creature for that player, for any player, essentially. This is, again, a commander that is obviously an amazing toolbox commander. It's also an incredibly powerful commander. It is somewhat of a broken commander, even some might say, essentially. But yeah, the way that this player is building it isn't like, oh, okay, I'm going to combo off with Kenny and win myself. It's like, no, I'm going to utilize Kenny just to actually have another player win. I'm literally going to utilize all these effects just to help out that other player. So being able to essentially do that is, again, problematic, because you are changing the game from 1v1v1v1 to literally, because I am playing this deck, because I sat down and decided to do this, it is 2v1v1. And again, inherently, the other two players are at a giant disadvantage. And, I mean, again, like, some players that are going to be, like, you know, the one that the player chooses to be king-made, essentially, some players are going to be okay with that, and other players will be like, well, I didn't really win on my own at all, and I don't feel good about this at all. So you kind of ruin the game for all three other players because you want to play the support deck, and feeling that you won because you helped someone else win might seem like it's a nice thing, but it's kind of taking away from the entire experience from everyone. And again, with this kind of a build, like, literally, you kind of take down the downside, the inherent downside of many cards out there that are not built in that way. Like, Secret Rendezvous came to mind, where it's a card where when it first came out, it was kind of laughable-ish. It's not a bad card at all, and this is a great card for politicking, but you're not even politicking, again, with a king-making deck. You are literally just actually actively helping out another player. So you entirely take out the downside of this card, and it turns all into upside for your strategy. Sorcery for 3 mana, you and target opponent each draw 3 cards. You're literally just like, okay. Again, the downside of this card is again, you have to politic with it. You have to be like, okay, like, hey, I'll give you 3 cards. We got to do this for me or whatever. You got to actually make deals with this card usually. This instead is, oh no, I picked that other player again, in this case, the Caesar Legion Empire, because I really like Fallout. So therefore, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to, draw 3 cards. You're going to draw 3 cards. And I'm literally just giving you 3 free cards. Versus the other 2 opponents obviously aren't getting any benefit at all versus like a true group hug strategy, which again, isn't that liked for the most part anyways, is more so like, oh no, everyone draws 3 cards or whatever would be a card in that type of strategy. This one's more so literally like 3 mana, draw 6 cards. Or again, that other player literally just, the Caesar's Legion Empire player just literally gets 3 cards for free for doing absolutely nothing other than having a deck that the player that is the sport player actively likes. Of course, other cards like Humble Defector, again, a great politics card if you're going to be building it in that. Again, Eddie utilizes this in Marchesa, and it's a great politics play. But again, all players aren't necessarily on board with like, all right, like I'm going to be giving you this back, or I'm going to make a deal with you. Again, it has to be like a give and take with that. It's not just inherently like, hey, I like you. Here, take a Humble Defector, all right? And then we just both give back and forth to each other again. Or like Lauren of the Third Path, without any politicking, I should say again. Lauren of the Third Path, a 2/1 Human Artificer with Vigilance, enters battlefield stroke to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So again, obviously, that's like, just Eldritch Regenerator right there. But on top of that, tap you and target opponent draw a card. Literally just being like, okay, I've decided that, again, I like you for whatever reason. I'm going to king make you. Let's just both keep drawing cards. You get free cards throughout the game. No downside at all for this card at all. Tenuous Truce. Enchant opponent. At the beginning of enchant opponent's end step, you and that player draw a card. When you attack enchant opponent or a planeswalker they control, or when they attack you or planeswalker you control, sacrifice it again. It's never going to be sacrificed if you are playing this support strategy. And that other player is like, yeah, sure, whatever. You're just going to let me win? Why would I ever attack you? Because you don't care about winning. I don't need to take you out. You literally might even be like, hey, when you take out those other 2 players, I will literally just quit the game and you win. There's no reason for you ever to attack. So this is just a 2 mana, we both draw a card spell. Basically, both draw a card effect that is repeatable every single time. So yeah, these cards that, again, are meant to be more political, meant to be, all right, we make a deal, meant to be, we've got to actually, figure out how this is going to work for us. At some point, I'm going to stab you in the back, or you stab me in the back, or whatever. Things are going to actually come to a point where we have to actually, break that truce. You don't have to do that at all, because again, literally you're playing, hey, 2 versus 1 versus 1, and it doesn't matter. Wedding Ring, another card that does see a good amount of play again, but one that does, again, kind of give you that advantage. You're going to take advantage of this card, and when that opponent is drawing cards, let's read it real quick. Enters the battlefield if it was cast. Target opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. When an opponent controls an artifact named Wedding Ring, draws a card during their turn, you draw a card. When an opponent who controls an artifact named Wedding Ring gains life during their turn, you gain that much life. Again, you are benefiting whenever that opponent is doing something. So again, there are like these like political cards essentially, but you're turning them on their head. Replication Technique, again, yet another kind of political card as well. Source for 5 mana. Demonstrate, a very political, essentially, mechanic itself. But again, when you're literally turning this on its head and saying like, no, there's like no downside to it at all. It's just all I care about helping you out. It's all upside. Because when you cast it, you can copy it. If you do choose an opponent to also copy it, players may choose additional targets for the copies. Create tokens, copy target opponent you control. A very good card, a very cool card. I love this card. But yeah, again, there has to be that, again, making a deal with it typically in Commander. It's politicking. You actually don't want to have your opponent copy something typically. You don't want to be like, okay, yeah, you get something for free. But in this case, it's just, oh, this is 3 spells for the price of 1 with no downside because you are just trying to actively help that other player win while you're not actually trying to win yourself. Or how about Silverquill Lecturer? I'm sure that's in that deck as well. 3/3 core wizard for 5 mana in white. Creature spells you cast have Demonstrate. So again, now every single time you cast a creature spell, your opponent is copying it as well. So literally you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like you just, every single creature I play, you get an extra creature, essentially. It's for no reason other than the fact that I like your deck and I want you to win, and I don't care about winning myself. Sylvan Offering, again, a card that, again, has an inherent downside to it, essentially. For a politics strategy, sure, you could make use of those cards later with, like, Reigns of Power, like, I gain control of those creatures that I gave you, ha 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 ha! Or, Insurrection, I guess, is more so the card, but yeah. With a group hug strategy, one that does more kind of lean on political control, you eventually are going to take advantage of this. But when it comes to a support strategy, you don't care that you just gave an opponent all those creatures. Choose an opponent, you and that player each create an XX green tree folk creature token, and choose an opponent, you and that player each create X11 green elf warrior creature tokens. This basically is just doubling up all those tokens for your, two-headed giant kind of army, essentially. And again, it takes off all the downside of these cards because you are just changing basically the inherent rules of the game that everyone essentially agrees to when they sit down at a table, is that like everyone is trying to win. You aren't trying to win. You are trying to help one other player win. So essentially, you're just like, okay, I'm playing support. And then literally, unless there's another quote unquote support player like also at the table who's going to be supporting the other player, it is literally just a very unfair advantage for the king-made player. And of course, it's just an inherently different game that players really did not sign up to play to start things off. Benevolent offering an instant for 4 mana in white. Choose an opponent. You and that player each put 3 1/1 spirit creature tokens flying on the battlefield, and also gain 2 life for each creature control and 2 life for each creature that he or she controls. Yeah, again, literally just finding all these cards that are meant for a politics type of play, or maybe even literally like two-headed giant essentially, but now you're just like, you know what, again, I'm just changing this entirely to something else. It is just 2 versus 1 versus 1. Literally, again, it was even mentioned, like, you know, if you just like have counter spells, literally just building a deck that is all counter spells essentially, you could do the exact same thing, which would be absolutely obnoxious, but you can literally just like, okay, I'm just supporting that other player. I'm not counterspelling any of the cards from the Caesar Legion Emperor's deck. I'm literally just counterspelling anything that that player does not like from the other 2 players. And again, it's just like, you're not trying to win. You're not trying to do anything. You're just trying to get another player to win. That's not a game of Commander. That's not what people sign up for when they're playing Commander. Again, Commander is a very, for the most part, very friendly and open format and welcome to many decks out there. But the concept of this strategy, again, I've really never thought of, but it is completely, in a weird way, again, for Commander being a very friendly format, against everything, because you are kind of taking everything that every other player is doing out of the game as a consideration for how the game is supposed to go. You are literally just like, you know what, instead of doing that, we're playing this entirely different game where it's 2 versus 1 versus 1, and I've got Kenrith the Return King, and I'm literally just going to utilize this not to benefit me, but to benefit another player, and essentially, hopefully, they win the game, and they're probably going to win the game because they literally have an unfair advantage over the other 2 players. You literally just have 2 players playing as one, essentially, versus the other 2 players. It is a 3-player game where 1 player gets a giant benefit and the other 2 players do not. They basically get twice as many turns in a way. So, again, I understand, like, the thought process of, I'm just trying to be a friendly player. I'm just trying to be someone who comes to the LGS and actually, you know, helps other people and makes them feel good. But you actually might not be making anyone at the table feel good at all. And again, I'm definitely not trying to, and the other people in this, in the Reddit post weren't trying to make the other player feel bad at all. It's just something where, again, it is a strategy where it seems like it could be friendly, but for many, many, many reasons, it actively is hurting, essentially, the concept of Commander in general, where it's just kind of taking the entire point out of the game. Kind of like Divine Intervention again, which is a very salty card. It's taking the entire point out of playing the Commander game. You're not trying to prove how good your deck is against these other decks, essentially. You're literally just trying to say, oh, okay, the player that has 2 people playing for them wins versus the other 2 players that are playing alone. That's literally what the game becomes. And yeah, I've built so many decks just, you know, as a joke, essentially, you know, like my, you know, like, hey, lose your friends for a $10 deck. This deck might lose your friends more than any other decks out there. This literally might. This just a support deck where it's like the entire purpose of the deck literally isn't to win. It's not to draw like Divine Intervention. It's not just like Group Hug in general where everyone gets benefits, essentially, where that still rubs players the wrong way. A lot of players the wrong way, essentially, but at least like you're benefiting everyone. You're just speeding things up for everyone. This strategy is literally, I'm just going to speed things up for one player, give them all the benefits, and actively work against the other players. Again, counterspell their things, whatever I need to do to make it so the one player that I chose for whatever reason to win just wins. The game, again, when it comes to a game of Commander, you sit down on a table, you probably have, a 25% chance of winning most of the time, essentially, right? You have 4 players, you have 25% chance. Yeah, I'd say that the player that is getting king made in this support time strategy, you probably have like a 75% chance of winning. At the very least 50, because like you are, 2 players versus 1 versus 1. The very least 50, but essentially probably more so like 70, 75, maybe 80, maybe even more than that. Because again, it is literally 2 versus 1 versus 1. with a deck that is built entirely around one of the players. So it might even be higher than that. So again, you are changing the outcome of the game. You are changing the thought process behind the game. You're changing what the game is entirely. You're literally just playing a game of two-headed giant where the other side of the table isn't playing together. So it's a very, very different game. So again, I understand why that player who thought that they were being kind, being nice, was, upset, that other players necessarily didn't like their deck and didn't want them to play that deck, and that was the only deck that they had. But it is something that, yeah, I think players need to be able to have that discussion with and be like, okay, yeah, I might be okay with playing against Group Hug, but this isn't even Group Hug. This is something entirely different where you're actively not trying to win the game. You are actively just trying to help other player win the game, and by doing that, yeah, it's taking away from the experience of everyone else. So, yeah, I mean, again, there are different levels to kingmaking. This is probably the furthest level to kingmaking, obviously, because the entire deck is built around just kingmaking. Group Hug, in a way, can be kingmakey-y, but, again, depends on the level of Group Hug. And, again, if it is just everyone gets all these benefits, it's speeding all the things up, which still many players don't like playing against, potentially. I don't. But yeah, it's not to that level where it's just, no, I'm only speeding things up for one player, helping them out, hurting all the other players, and yeah, it's just a different type of strategy that, again, I don't think many Commander players out there would be very, very fond of, and I don't think many Commander players out there would like playing against. But yeah, that could just be me, but I don't think it is. And with that, this episode is coming to a close. Comment below with your thoughts on it, and of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.